Emotional Intelligence Part 2. Emotions are basic judgments about ourselves and our place in the world. The projection of the values and ideals, structures and mythologies according to which we live and through which we experience our lives. This is why our emotions are so dependent on our opinions, beliefs, and values. A change in my beliefs entails, not causes, a change in my emotion. For example, when I learned that my original opinion of Jerry was based upon misinformation, my emotional state went from anger to embarrassment. I cannot be angry if I do not believe that someone has offended me or wronged me in some significant way. But I can be wrong in my belief and hence susceptible to emotional change. Anger involves a moral judgment as well. Perhaps an appeal to moral standards and not just a personal evaluation. My anger is that moral judgment. Likewise, my embarrassment in learning that my original belief is now mistaken is my moral judgment to the effect that I am ultimately responsible for that mistaken belief. Now, of course, if my anger is justified in terms of being the appropriate response to a genuinely provoking situation, then my anger is my moral judgment to the effect that I am ultimately responsible for the correct belief. My sadness, sorrow, grief are moral judgments of various severity to the extent that I have suffered a loss. But just as credible would be my indifference, my contempt, and my self-pity. These are all moral judgments about the world and its objects, one of which I just lost. The point is that emotions are evaluative and normative judgments about my world, my situation in this world, and about all the other persons and objects in this world. There are no a priori limits on the scope and objects of the emotions. You can wholly invest yourself in anything, gardening, collecting plastic flowers, or building model airplanes, with a passion more usually reserved for human lovers, children, and parents. But what distinguishes the emotions is not necessarily what they value, but that they value. That they endow our lives with meaning. In the larger picture, the aim of our emotions, the reason we have emotions in the first place, is to enhance our lives, to make our lives better, to help us get what we want and need from life. Once again, in terms of evolution, there are the minimal standards of adaptivity and survival. Evolution does not involve the mere play of chance combinations of elements that were able to survive natural selection, but rather evolution involves a successful fitting of creatures with these elements with an environment that co-determines survival adaptivity through reproductive success. But most of us want more out of our life than mere survival and the mere passing on of our genes. We also want to maintain and often maximize self-esteem. Emotions are a large part of our strategies for doing this. They are instrumental in getting us what we want and helping us to avoid what we do not want, and sometimes they themselves may be what we ultimately want, such as true love or complete happiness. And this gives us a larger picture of the reasonableness of emotions. It is reasonable to maximize our well-being. Our emotions are reasonable insofar as they further our personal and collective well-being, and non-reasonable insofar as they degrade or diminish our well-being. It should be noted that noble, intelligent, and virtuous emotions may end in total disaster, but are fully reasonable nonetheless, having to do with living our lives as we really believe our lives ought to be led. Contrast this with equally reasonable but stupid or vicious emotions that turn out to have admirable consequences. In general, it is rare that any emotion type alone is either reasonable or non-reasonable all the time and in every context. Occasions, circumstances, frames of reference are very important. Every emotion is a uniquely subjective judgment of the self and its realities. It is through our emotions that we constitute ourselves. In many emotions, the self-involvement is explicit and obvious, as in pride and shame self-love, and guilt. Many emotions, particularly those which tie us closer with other persons, are neither solely about oneself or the other person, but rather about the relationship, as in love and in hate and in anger and in jealousy. Many emotions, however, leave the judgment of self implicit, such as admiration, envy, and indignation. But in every case, explicit or implicit, the self is the essential pole of emotional judgment, the standpoint from which our judgments of our world and of other persons begin.